Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Good evening. For those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Ed O'Malley. I have the privilege of being the founding president and CEO of the Kansas Leadership Center. Thank you for being here tonight. Many of you have been here before. Raise your hand if you've been here before. Wonderful. Welcome back. And if this is your first time at the Kansas Leadership Center, awesome. Welcome for the first time to the Kansas Leadership Center. Welcome, welcome. Thank you. We have an exciting conversation tonight planned to explore one of our most pressing issues. And somebody asked me earlier tonight if I was excited about it. And I said, well, of course I am. We've got a hot topic, a bunch of open-ended questions, and no idea what the end game is tonight. But you're going to help create that end game with us. And we so appreciate your time and your energy and your thoughts in this conversation. Before we get into the conversation, I want to give you just a little background about what we're up to tonight. I want to remind you what the Kansas Leadership Center is all about. We exist to create a culture of leadership all across the state because we believe, and our friends next door at the Kansas Health Foundation believe, that a culture of leadership in organizations and communities and neighborhoods is necessary to create a stronger, healthier Kansas. If you don't have quality leadership, you can't create stronger, healthier places. We've been at this work now for 13 years. We've worked with thousands and thousands of Kansans now, building their leadership skill. Those of you who have been here know that we work with all sorts of Kansans from all different parts of the state, from all different professions, from all different sectors, from all different viewpoints. And they come together, often in this building, occasionally outside this building. They come together to figure out how to be more effective at mobilizing those in their communities, in their neighborhoods, in their organizations to make more progress. You'll know if you've been here before that there are some things that we believe deeply. For example, we believe that leadership is incredibly rare, that it doesn't happen very often, that it's the exception, not the rule. And a way of thinking about that is that we believe that most of the toughest issues, the easiest thing for us to do is to kick them down the road, to kick the can down the road, to put off working on the tough thing, whether it's a big issue like the one we're going to talk about tonight, or whether it's that issue inside your organization that's been an issue for a long, long time. It's easier just to kick the can down the road. We think leadership is quite rare. If you've been around for a while at KLC, you'll know that we believe leadership is an activity. It's something that happens, and it's about people engaging. And often it's about getting unusual voices, lots of voices together to engage together on tough issues. You'll also know that we think leadership and problem solving is so about engagement, lots of engagement. Tonight we're going to do a lot of that engagement with you. 13 years ago, we set about to turn the idea of leadership development upside down and think about it totally different. Rather than working with the select few, the folks who are on track to be in big fancy positions, we would work with everybody. 13 years later, folks around the country, around the world are working to model themselves, their leadership development institutions, after what's going on right here in Kansas. And I hope that's something that makes all Kansans really proud. A few years ago, we launched what we call our Civic Engagement Initiative. We launched the Leadership Development Initiative first, wanting to start working with Kansans and building their capacity. And then a few years ago, we added the Civic Engagement Initiative. And the whole point behind the Civic Engagement Initiative is to help connect Kansans who have been learning those ideas back there on those banners. Those folks online can't see those banners, but I'm pointing to our principles and our competencies that people learn when they come to the Kansas Leadership Center. The whole point of the Civic Engagement Initiative is to help people who have been learning those ideas become more equipped, become more inspired to engage in civic life. To take those ideas into the civic arena, because we know those ideas are powerful. We launched the Journal Talks initiative a few years ago, and tonight begins our 2020 Journal Talk effort. And the whole point of Journal Talks is really threefold. Number one, we want to help create better conversations all across the state on this topic of immigration this year. That is one of the goals. That's one of the purposes of Journal Talks. We think that in and of itself, one, can happen, and two, is a good thing. There are two other purposes to Journal Talks. The second purpose is we want to demonstrate the power of those ideas, those competencies, those leadership principles. We want to demonstrate the power of those ideas when focused on one of our toughest civic issues. We want people to see that. We want them to see how conversation can be different, more productive. And then the third purpose of Journal Talks is we want to inspire people to engage more with these ideas on tough civic issues. Tonight is really the beginning of the 2020 KLC Journal Talk initiative. We imagine lots of discussions across Kansas on this topic of immigration. Tonight is really the meeting before the meeting, or it's the peek behind the curtain. It's the look under the hood. It's really using this discussion tonight to help us imagine how should we craft and create a series of discussions all across the state that people, we hope, like you, will host and call people together in dialogue. So tonight, we're not just talking about immigration. We're also talking about how do we talk about immigration. Okay? And we have questions designed to help us figure this out. So if you were hoping to come and just listen, you'll be incredibly disappointed. We'll make it very awkward for you not to talk. We'll do a lot of the conversation in small groups in the room, and we'll help you understand how that's going to happen here in just a bit. Again, two goals tonight. Number one is that you help inform how we structure, design, craft, and create these conversations across Kansas over the coming 10 months. The second goal tonight is that you might be so inspired to host one of these conversations yourself over the coming months. Over the past couple of years, we created and hosted conversations all about the topic of guns and public safety. That was the topic for 2019. In 2018, the topic was the relationship between communities of color and law enforcement. This year, the topic is immigration. We craft these conversations with your help and with your support, and we so appreciate that. Tonight, we're going to get you talking quite a bit, so I want to get you talking real quick right now. And it's just the warm-up question, and the question is simply, why did you choose to come tonight? Why did you choose to be here tonight? There's a lot going on in our community and your community. There's a lot going on. Why did you choose to come here tonight? For this question, it's just a quick turn to your neighbor and have a quick conversation. Of course, if you don't like who your neighbor is, you can get up and move right now. Nobody's going to do that. Okay, all right. It's always very awkward when somebody does get up and move. So real quick, why are you here? Why did you come to this tonight? Take 60 seconds, chat with somebody close to you just to get yourselves warmed up into talking. Go for it. right, let's come on back together. Come on back. A lot more conversation to come. A lot more conversation to come. Before we dive into that conversation, I have a couple things we want to do. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce our good friend Sean Rojas, who's the Director of Civic Engagement for KLC. Chris Green, the Managing Editor of the Journal, will be introduced here in just a bit as well. We'll have a discussion later, and one thing I want you to know is that we're going to be taking tons of notes in the small groups. Those notes will be used to help inform the work ahead. So the discussion isn't just to have a nice, interesting discussion for you and those around you. The point is to inform our work, and it will inform our work. There are microphones all throughout this room. When it is time for you to be so inspired that you want to engage, not just in the small group, but in the large group, we're going to ask you to grab a microphone. And even those of you who have big, strong voices, we're going to ask you to grab a microphone. Because it's not about your voice, it's about some people's ears. Okay? So we're going to use the mics. And I'm going to ask your forgiveness right now. When somebody doesn't use a mic, I'm going to literally cut them off and make sure somebody hands them a mic, because it's important that folks can hear. And also, people online can't hear unless we use the mics. And we have 100 or so people, maybe billions of people online right now, and we want to make sure that it all gets captured. I do want to also say that tonight, I would ask you to be curious. To be curious about the questions we're asking, to be curious about what those around you are saying, be curious about how you're feeling in the conversation. Be curious tonight. I'd also ask you to share the time. Know that when you're in a small group, there's going to be 6, 7, 8, 10. I don't know of you in that small group, and you got to share the time. And our facilitators will help you do that. Sean, let me hand it over to you for just a moment. There's some folks you want to introduce, some groups that you want to acknowledge that are here tonight.
So I want to thank a few people that are here tonight that helped us get the room full. So first is our Civic Engagement Advisory Committee. Will the members raise your hand if you're in the room? Some of them are the small group facilitators here. This represents a body of 20 people that we've selected throughout the state that help guide our civic engagement initiative. So thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for helping us out. The second group are our Community Leadership Program friends. Raise your hand if you're connected with the Community Leadership Program. So these are local leadership programs across the state that we partner with who are teaching leadership as well in their communities. And we're excited that there's a small group of them here tonight to think about how they might host a discussion back in their community with a community leadership program. And lastly, the Leadership Transformation Grants. Are there any Leadership Transformation grantees here in the room? So there's probably more online as well. But these folks are organizations who are sending teams of people to Kansas Leadership Center. So thank you for spreading the word to get people here tonight. And thanks everyone else for showing up.
Sean's also the guy that anything you want to know about the Civic Engagement Initiative, you can ask Sean, and he'll help you figure it all out. And he'll put you to work, too, on the civic engagement efforts. Chris Green has been the managing editor of our magazine, The Journal, now. Chris, for how many years? 7 years. And he took a publication that was a nutty idea of the Leadership Center, that was a good publication, and he turned it into an amazing publication and built a phenomenal team of journalists and artists who create that publication 4 issues a year. A publication that started to win some local awards and then started to win some regional awards. And last year, Chris and myself and a few members of our team had the honor of being in the National Press Club and receiving a national award for the work of the Journal. It's a great piece of civic journalism, and it's designed to do 2 things. Number 1, tell stories of leadership. Number 2, lift up issues that need more leadership. Excited to have Chris Green here tonight to get us started in this conversation, to help us get a grounding of this issue of immigration. Chris, it's all yours.
Well, I want to thank you for coming tonight. This is really special for me because you're not just going to be a part of a process of helping us design what we talk about, you're also going to really inform the work of the journal. And this summer, we're going to be publishing what we plan to be a double edition focused exclusively on the topic of immigration. And we'll want to make sure that you're able to see the feedback you provide, the ideas and questions and thoughts that you have reflected in that edition. But being a journalist and really caring about facts, I wanted to make sure that even though I didn't have a magazine to provide you with tonight, that I had something. Because I think in civic discourse, it's really important to have something common that binds people together, some common sort of facts, something that everyone can reference and share at the same time. And I didn't want to have a panel or a bunch of speakers. And so I sort of had this flashback of this immigration mini course that I took that was put out by the Pew Research Center. Now, the Pew Research Center is in Washington, D.C., and they describe themselves as a fact tank that informs the public about issues, attitudes, and trends that are shaping the world. And as a journalist, they're a source that I turn to a lot and that have really informed my work. Like, whenever I want to understand an issue, that really helps. And in a world where a lot of us, our viewpoints kind of influence how we trust, the Pew Research Center is something that I think is widely trusted, widely respected, and widely considered accurate with the information they provide. And so I took this course. It was about 5 or 6 emails, and I kind of had this crazy idea. So I wrote an email to Mark Hugo Lopez, who's the Director of Global Migration and Democracy at the Pew Research Center, and I said, could I take this course and turn it into an interactive quiz that a bunch of people gathered at an event could take to learn about the topic of immigration and also just have a shared experience? And fortunately, Mr. Lopez said, yes, that'd be fine. And so that's what we're going to do. And you're going to answer about 8 questions that come from that mini course. And so you can do this from your seats, and those of you who are watching online will be able to do it as well. And so I'm going to do something that you don't normally do at meetings. I'm going to ask you to take out your cell phone and actually use it. And you go on the web, you can go to pollev.com, enter KLC polls, and this will allow you to respond to the quiz that we're about to take. If you, and we have the Wi-Fi password right down here if you still need to connect to the Wi-Fi. And you folks online can do this as well. There's another option. You can also text KLC polls to 22333, and then you'll just enter your answer in the text of your message. And so my hope is through this experience, we'll have a little fun, we'll learn something, and we'll see you came to an event about immigration, how much do we really know about immigration as a group? Because when I took this quiz, I was really surprised about some of the things that I didn't know. So your first question. Oh. I'm going to watch people typing. All right, are we having success? Is everybody finding it? Anybody struggling? All right, I'm going to go on, and you will get time to catch up. Yeah. So our first question, so we're talking about immigration. So what percentage of people living in the United States are immigrants? I give a couple minutes for everyone to answer, and it's kind of cool. We'll see the percentages go back and forth as people answer. And people, anybody changing their minds? Because you can change your mind. The wisdom of crowds at work. All right. So in 10 seconds, I'm going to have Julian give us the answer here. So make sure you get your last answers in. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All right. What's the right answer? 14%. Yeah, so the United States has more immigrants than any other nation in the world. And in 2017, there were 44.4 million immigrants in the country, meaning that almost 1 in 7 people living here was born in another country and was not a U.S. citizen at birth and born in another country. These immigrants include both residents with legal status as well as those in the country illegally. And you can see that the bulk of immigrants are concentrated in the West and the South, with the plains, where we are in Kansas, having a much lower percentage than the rest of the country. So that's the U.S. What if we looked at Kansas? What percentage of Kansas residents are foreign born? About 10%, about 7%, about 4%, or about 1%? All right, so it looks like we're starting to solidify around B. Can you show us, Julian, what the correct answer is? It's 7%. So according to Kansas State University professor Matthew Sanderson, the percentage of Kansans who were born in the U.S. in 1870 were foreign-born reached 14% in 1870. And so that was sort of the high point of people being foreign-born. In 1970, 100 years later, the percentage was 1%. So when you go back to about 7%, that's kind of about in the middle of where we've been historically. So now I kind of want to ask you about immigration trends. So more than 11.6 million U.S. immigrants were born in Mexico. And so that's the top birth country for immigrants living in the U.S. What part of the world is currently sending the most immigrants to the U.S. now?
Immigrants that get in or immigrants that want to get in?
The ones that actually come in. And your choices are Asia, Latin America, Europe, Africa, Australia, New Zealand. I almost put in Antarctica just to see if I could get someone to get that answer, but I thought that might have been a little too far-fetched. All right, we seem to be slowing down a little bit. All right, everybody get your last answers in. So, Julian, what's our correct answer here? It's Asia. And wow, a whole bunch of you knew that one. So Mexicans had been the largest group among new arrivals to the U.S. over the past 3 decades. But in recent years, that has changed as immigration from Mexico has slowed. And so today, India and China send as many people to the United States as Mexico. And that sort of reflects this really broad shift of immigration away from Latin America and toward Asia among new immigrant arrivals. So illegal immigration is a big topic in our civic debate. So when we're talking about illegal immigrants, what percentages are we talking about? What percentage of U.S. immigrants are not authorized to be living here? Is it more than 75%? Is it about 50%? About 25%? About 15%? Or less than 15%? Looks like we're slowing down, so Julian, whenever you're ready, let's see what the correct answer is. Okay, so the correct answer is about 25%. So it was the third most popular choice among this group. So there are 35.2 million legal immigrants living in the United States today, and that makes up 3/4 of the foreign-born population. More than half of those are naturalized U.S. citizens, which are immigrants who have been granted U.S. citizenship. Most of the rest were admitted to the U.S. with a visa or some other permission, and then they later acquired legal permanent residency status, which we know is a green card. A smaller number of legal immigrants are just here on the U.S. on temporary visas. So in what year did the number of unauthorized immigrants coming to the U.S. peak? Okay, let's wrap up our answers here. Julian, whenever you're ready. Yeah, so the correct answer is 2007. So after rising for many years, the number of unauthorized immigrants peaked at more than 12 million in 2007, which was the first year of the Great Recession. The total declined after that, and the total in 2016 was the lowest since 2004. And so by contrast, even though illegal immigration has declined, legal immigration has continued to increase in the U.S. So speaking of legal immigration, when we talk about legal immigration, what is the most likely path by which someone receives a green card in this country? Is it because they are refugees or are granted asylum? Is it because they come here to work or study? Is it because they are sponsored by family members, or is it because they win a visa lottery? Looks like we're pretty close to evenly split here. Julian, can you tell us what the right answer is? Yeah, so they're sponsored by family members. And actually, it's pretty big. 66% of green cards went to immigrants sponsored by family members in 2017. So family-based immigration, which is referred to as chain migration by some of the people who want to reduce it, has long been the most common way that people get green cards. Immediate relatives of U.S. citizens, spouses, minor unmarried children, and parents received 46% of green cards in 2017, and there are no quotas on how many can receive them each year. Another 21% of green cards went to other relatives of U.S. citizens and to immediate relatives of legal permanent residents. Annual quotas for these categories result in really long waiting lists that can last for more than 20 years. So when we think about the impact of immigrants on our country, what portion of total U.S. population growth has been due to new immigrants, their children, and their grandchildren since 1965? So it looks like 35% is the plurality choice, and 20% is up there, and Just over half. Julian, can you tell us what the right answer is? Yeah, it's just over half. So immigrant numbers really started rising after the passage of a sweeping immigration law in 1965, and it just pretty much rewrote everything. And the law replaced country quotas with a system that prioritized visas for family members of immigrants already in the U.S. and skilled workers. If current trends continue, the immigration will be an even bigger factor in the future, responsible for 90% of all population growth in the U.S. in 2065, according to the Pew Research Center. And now for your last question. So we're here at an event to talk about immigration, been a controversial topic in our political debates. But I wonder if you know, are perceptions of immigrants growing more negative in this country or more positive?
More negative or positive since when?
Just in general, what's the trend?
Talking about legal or illegal?
We're talking about immigrants in general. We have a really, it's not a consensus, but that's a pretty overwhelming majority. So Julian, do you want to tell us the answer when you're ready? So the correct answer is positive. So in 1994, far more Americans thought immigrants had a negative impact than a positive one. But over time, opinion has slowly shifted in the opposite directions. And Americans' views about immigration have become more positive overall, but of course, as you see here, there's a big partisan difference. So Democrats increasingly have more favorable views than Republicans. White Americans and older Americans, people who are generally more likely to vote Republican, they still tilt positive, but by much smaller margins than Americans of other races and those who are younger. And so this is a question that Pew has asked of immigrant impacts for about 2 decades. And in 2017, 65% of the public said that immigrants strengthen the country with their hard work and talents, compared to just 26% who said that they burden the country by taking jobs, housing, and health care. And that's a more positive assessment than at any point in the last 2 decades. And so it's interesting, I don't want to steal any of Ed's thunder, but how different our perceptions were from what the polling data suggest. And it also made me think of a poll that I saw that came out of the Docking Institute from Fort Hays State University that measured support in Kansas for President Trump's zero-tolerance policy, and 56% of Kansans expressed support in that poll. So I thought about trying to give you a question that no one can get wrong. So all of these other questions, these are kind of hard. No one can get this question wrong. So so this is a data gathering question that will sort of give us a sense of this room and what we're like and the kind of conversations we have. So I want to know, within the last year, if you've had a conversation about immigration with someone who holds opinions that you disagree with. So there's no right answer to show on this one. I'll turn it back over to Ed and see what we can talk about now.
Thank you, Chris. So the first question for us is just simply, what surprised you? What reactions do you have to the quiz? The idea of the quiz was just to give us a grounding, just to get us grounded in some common facts. So what surprised you? Or what reactions do you have to that quiz? And again, grab a microphone and no right or wrong answer to this question. Just wanting a little bit of reaction to it.
Hello. That the questionnaire pretty much confirmed the reason that I came here for, which is I'm an immigrant myself, but I thought I knew very little about immigration because people tend to think about immigration as a group, as a single group, a monolithic group. And what this questionnaire told me is that I know almost nothing about immigration. So that was revealing. And the one thing that really surprised me was the perception of immigration, because of all the events that we heard in the last few years since the last administration, in terms of people taking action against, yes, for the different events that happen around the country.
Thank you for getting us going. Any other thoughts, reactions, surprises to the
I was surprised that where the immigrants are coming from, that they're coming from Asia. So.
Yeah, that I found that surprising too. Chris gave me a preview of this. It was very, very intense. He asked me the questions, and I had to tell him my answers. I couldn't hide behind my text messages when he was sharing this with me, and I'm pretty sure I got that one wrong. That was surprising to me too. Yes.
I couldn't help but think, like, as we were asking and answering these questions, how different my answer would be in different circles, like just how to interpret the question. There were some of these questions like, well, if I was hanging out with this group of people, I would have probably answered it very differently because I would have read it differently.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Any thoughts? I think there were. Over here.
Well,
yeah.
I was just going to say I agree with the first comment about just being surprised by the perception of immigration, but maybe it just speaks more to the rhetoric that we hear more often and how loudly that is, as opposed to the explanation we heard, which you don't hear often.
Yeah. So those of you who are KLC alums know we talk about interpretations of the data, right? So that's one interpretation of why we might feel one way or another. I think there were three, I could be wrong, I think there were three questions that collectively we got wrong. And I believe they were the percentage of immigrants here illegally, the population growth due to immigrants. We got that question wrong, and then our feelings growing more positive or growing more negative. I found it intriguing. I don't know what it says about us, but that those were the three that we seemed to get wrong, and I found that personally intriguing. I'm not sure what it means. Yeah, Cindy. Flip that mic on. There you go.
The question on population growth was really shocking to me because we have a very large country geographically. So to fill it up, we need people, and these people have come from other countries. And I can't help but think that maybe they were some of the best people from those countries. And our country has profited from that. And I don't know, it's just a lot to take in.
Yeah, what did we all, Chris, do you remember, or Julian, what did we guess? What did collectively we guess was the answer to that? The correct answer was half of the population growth since 1965 can be attributed to immigrants, their children or grandchildren. What did we guess it was?
We slightly underestimated it by 35%.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating question, I think. Okay, well, we've gotten some facts on the table, and we're warmed up and are thinking a little bit. We're going to now attempt something that might be a little crazy. We're going to ask you to move. And what we want to do, we know that many of you came here with others. And we want to purposefully have you sit with other people now. Just to maybe to experiment a little bit with the idea of how do we engage when we're with people we know, how do we engage when we're not with people we know. So on your name tag, there is a letter, I believe, or letters on the name tags, okay? A, B to something like that, okay? All right, so you need to know what letter you have. So in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to find the small group that corresponds with your letter. Lots more discussion to come, lots more chance to share your thoughts. But if you're one of our facilitators, could you stand and hold up your letter? Okay, so these are our folks who are small group facilitators. They have a letter, all right? We have A, B, C over here, D, E, this is the kind of the middle. Over here we got J and L, K. So a little bit of chaos. Move yourself close to your facilitator. Thank you. Go ahead and sit down. Cozy up. Make some new friends. If you're lost, ask for help. We can help out. Where's group L? L's right there. J, sorry, L is over there. A, B, C is kind of over this way. E, E, F, G, H is kind of over here. Okay, we're getting there. All right. And ultimately, if you wind up in the wrong group, it doesn't matter. So don't worry too much about it. By the way, it was random how we split you up. So there's no like big data behind how we split you up in the groups. It's just kind of random. So let me bring you together real quick before we get our first conversation going. Let me bring you together. Want to remind you to be curious, and my guess is your facilitator will help try to set a few ground rules for the conversation as you start this first conversation. The first question that we want you to explore, and we're going to give you, 7, 8 minutes or so, 9 minutes for this conversation. So be conscious of that when you're speaking. Be conscious of how much time you're taking, and be conscious of sharing the time. But the first question that we're going to ask you is, why does this issue feel hot or controversial? Why does this issue feel hot or controversial? Now, there's an assumption baked into the question that it does feel hot, that it does feel controversial, and you can question that assumption. You can debate that assumption if you'd like. But our sense was that it feels hot, it feels controversial. And so our question for you to get started is, why does it feel that way? So facilitators, we'll turn it over to you now. I know you want to set some ground rules. I'll call folks back here in about 8 or so minutes. Go for it. You have about 2 more minutes. About 2 more minutes.
To us as the immigrants or to us as a country? Okay.
That's something that I learned.
The fear of what would happen to us if we were to just relax and let immigration just
Okay, let's come on back. Let's come on back.
we don't really know how the immigration system works.
Let's come on back to the room, to the large group. No, stay in your small group. Yeah, but just come on back with me now. Come on back with me. So we've got more questions we want you to dig into in the small groups. Again, your discussion is going to help inform a year's worth of conversation across the state with diverse audiences coming together. So thank you for what you're doing. I want to get you back into small groups quickly, but I'd love to just hear some of the answers. Your small group facilitator is going to be sharing her or his notes back with KLC here in the coming days. So there's going to be a record of your small group conversation. But real quick, just somebody from this audience, give me a quick reaction to what you said or what you heard. And if you don't want to share your feelings, you can just share whatever the person next to you said. They won't care.
Yes. One of the things that kind of came up multiple times is that our lack of understanding makes this a hot and controversial issue. We don't understand immigration laws. We don't understand the plight of immigrants. We just don't understand.
Lack of understanding could lead it to be a hotter issue than maybe it would be otherwise if we understood more. Yes, sir.
There seems to be a bit of confusion between immigration and then the more smaller issue of illegal immigration.
Yeah, so we're conflating
two different.
Yeah, conflating different things. Yeah, real quick, go ahead, Shannon.
I can go down a quick list of what has made this such a hot issue. And we started down a list of hateful language, media bias, political extremism, 24 hours news cycle, one-upism that is prevalent today. And I have kind of a grocery list of a lot of things that has led to this, and not only this, but a lot of other topics that have become really difficult to talk about in today's climate.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you. How about one comment from here and one comment? We'll go over here. You're ready. Go ahead.
So one of the things that popped up was our distrust of the facts. And so because we're pervaded by fake news and incorrect facts, like some of us were like, well, is that even right?
Yeah, and even Chris, you notice Chris worked really hard to try to validate the Pew Research Center, right? I mean, he tried to explain, no, these are good facts, right? And so I think, I appreciate what you're saying. Let's go. One comment over here. Yes, Troy.
We had two comments here that kind of blended into one that's relevant, I think. The fact that people just are unaccepting of the change that's coming. The population growth reflects the change that's coming, and so people are unaccepting. And the other one that I think tied to it is we're not hearing or seeing or experiencing any personal connection. It's just impersonal to most of us.
Yeah, those both are really interesting. And the first one I'm really intrigued about because if you think we've experienced population growth since the beginning of this country. Something fundamentally has been different with population growth since 1965, right? And very interesting. Now, I'm going to move on to the next question, so you got to bear with me. And you can all act like politicians the rest of the night, meaning the next question I give you, if you don't want to answer that question, just answer whatever question you want to answer, okay? But I got to move on to the next question. So for the next two questions, For the next 2 questions, we're going to do something a little different. And let's switch on to the Elmo here, Julian. So we are going to create a continuum. I know I'm oversimplifying the world with this continuum. But on this edge of the continuum, these are people who will oversimplify this by saying these are no borders. Okay? No borders. On this end of the continuum, we're going to say these are people who are, I know I'm oversimplifying, okay? These are no immigration. Period. No borders, exclamation mark. No immigration, exclamation mark. I know I'm oversimplifying, okay? And what we want to do for the next couple questions is try to imagine how different factions in our society are interpreting this issue of immigration. Because we know as we gather people into conversation across our state over the next 10 months, that we're going to have people from all different, we use the word factions here at KLC. So we want your help tonight in helping us imagine what are they feeling, what are they thinking, what do they care about, okay? Now, there aren't just 2 factions. So we're going to do something tonight. We're going to think about this faction. We're going to think about this faction, okay? But we're also going to spend a little time thinking about this faction. Okay, so imagine it's a continuum, right? A continuum. We're also going to think about this faction, okay? And we're also going to think about this faction. So we're going to try, over the next 29 minutes, to dig into the feelings, the thinkings of, we're oversimplifying, really 5 different factions along a continuum. I have no more information to tell you about what this continuum means beyond no immigration, no borders. Okay? This discussion will help us fill this faction out, these factions out. But the way we're going to do this conversation now is a little different than what we've done so far. I'm going to ask you to put your shoes, your feet in the shoes of one of these factions. Okay? So for this part of the room, okay, all the small groups on this part of the room, for the next 2 questions, I would like you to answer the questions as if you were a part of the no immigration, exclamation mark, faction. Okay? Now, with all of these, I want you to do your best to avoid caricature. I want you to do your best to avoid flippant. Okay? I want you to do your best to reflect, right? The attitudes, the beliefs, the values, the points of view of this faction. This part of the room. For the next 2 questions, I want you to do your best to represent the no borders faction. Okay? Resist caricature. Resist flippant. Resist oversimplifying everything. Imagine yourself putting your head on the pillow at night as a member of this faction and trying to think about how do they think of themselves as they drift off to sleep related to these types of tough issues. Okay? All right, those of you here, this is a little tricky. I'm going to say the 3 groups here, okay, in the front of the first half. I want you all to think of yourself as this faction right here. Okay? You're not the no borders faction, but you're one step along the continuum. Okay? Again, answer these next 2 questions to the best of your ability from that perspective. Those of you, the groups in the back, the 3 groups in the back, would love for you to answer these next 2 questions to the best of your ability as this faction right here. So you're not the no immigration faction, but you're one step along the continuum that way. Okay? Those of you online, we'd like you, through your comments on Facebook We'd like you to do your best to embody the middle faction, folks in the middle of this continuum. We're experimenting with two things here, just to be totally transparent. Okay? We're experimenting with, number one, trying to flesh out what this continuum looks like and feels like. We're also experimenting with putting people in a position to articulate views that might not be their own. And what does that do for the conversation? There's a 20% chance you're in the faction that you actually are in. Okay? But 80% of you, by statistics, are in a different faction than what you probably feel or believe. So that's what we're doing here. So now, are the instructions clear? Okay, great. So here's the question. The first question in your small groups. Remember, you're trying to articulate to the best of your ability what you believe this faction would feel. Okay? The first question is, what does that faction care about? What do they worry about? It's really two questions in one. I apologize. What do they care about? What do they worry about? What do they care about? What do they worry about? And I would ask you to try hard to answer the question in a way that you think would honor how they would answer the question. It would be hard to do. Okay? I know it would be for me. Right? I'm sure it's hard for all of us. So the first question, what does that faction care about? What do they worry about? Go into your small groups, go for it. I'll bring you back here in about 7 or 8 minutes. Thanks. About 1 more minute. 1 more minute. All right, let's come on back together. Come on back. Come on back. Come on back. Here we go. All right, so let's try. We're going to end on time. We only have 18 minutes left. We got at least one more question to get to, but we'd love to hear some of the reactions, some of the thoughts, and honestly, because of timing, I'm going to go one right now, one per faction, right? So let's go this group here. These are our no borders, okay, people. One reflection, one thought, and it could be how you answered the question, or it could be a reflection on what that experience was like for you. But one thought, yes, go ahead.
We thought that it had more to do with human rights.
Oh, flip that.
Human rights.
Okay, so it has more to do with human rights than other things, perhaps. Okay, just because, Rob, you were trying to get on the last one, I'm going to sneak in another one from this faction. Go ahead.
Okay. None of us choose where we're born, and so we have a spirit of justice.
So yeah, strong spirit of justice at play in this group. Okay, thank you. Let's go. I think you all were the next group in, right? Okay. So one comment from this group. Let's get a mic to right here. Yeah, perfect. There we go.
I think that we're starting to have trust issues more in an economy and how we view each other and the social status that everybody has.
So keep going for me. Keep talking for a little bit. Keep going.
As we were talking about how the levels that we're at, minorities are slowly coming up the ladder. So before we look at it, everybody at the top there probably will be going, and the whole ladder will be switched.
So there's some movement going on. There's some mobility going on in the economy. You're thinking about the economy to some degree. Oh, thank you. Okay. How about that back group there? One comment from back there. Michelle, go for it.
So for our group, we really struggled with this a little bit because it wasn't really where we were. But part of it was the whole, how do we deal with these undocumented people? How do we deal with the language? How do we deal with all of the things that we no longer have control over because we're on the next to the no immigrants.
You're right here. Okay. So how do we say it again? So how do we deal?
So how do we deal with the change? How do we deal with the loss? How do we deal with the people that are not speaking our language anymore? The people that are we've got all this change, and we're not to the place where we just say they can't come, but we're only letting certain people come.
And what made it hard?
It made it hard because it's not what most of us believed, but you had to think out of what you've kind of heard, and how do we not make it political, but to be as factual as possible.
Yeah, I just so appreciate your candor with saying it was hard. It might not be where most of us were. And that's one thing we find at KLC. We found this on the issue of guns and public safety too. It seems to be so hard, even for people who know those ideas on those banners really, really well. Okay? Those leadership ideas, those ideas about engaging others. It's so hard to speak in an empathetic way about authentically how that group would feel. And I appreciate you all just giving voice to that. And my guess is there's a nugget in that feeling that is instructive for us as we go forward this year. So thank you. Let's go this group over here, this faction over here. Yes, sir, in the back.
Hello. So kind of the two main things. One was economic, like increased competition over jobs or things like that. And so it seems like. And then the other would be more cultural, both value in your having like a shared identity, but then also fears about what if these people who are different and have different values, like suddenly they don't care about the things we care about and are making decisions and things like, you know.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's never been a nation do this before, you know, to the extent we're doing it now, right? And so I hear some of that and what you're saying there. And by the way, I was coached during the break. I can just point like this to the factions. Thanks. Thank you, Brittany. It's this newfangled technology called an overhead projector. It's just really, really complicated. How about the middle faction? So Sam on our team has been monitoring the online chatter. So we asked the middle group to be the middle group, the people online to be the middle group. So Sam, give us a comment from that faction.
Yeah, there's a lot of commentary. Here's one. The middle group may be able to see both sides, that there are laws in place that should be followed, but also see and understand the circumstances that would lead someone to come here illegally. Want one more?
Sure.
One assumption I could make as a member of the middle faction in this scenario is that we care about accepting immigrants fleeing dangerous situations, but are afraid of accepting immigrants who may themselves be dangerous.
Got it. Thank you. So some views from potentially from the middle, able to perhaps see everything, struggling to commit to anything, perhaps because they can see everything.
Can I follow up on that?
Yes.
A further comment on that same last assumption is that they feel neither open borders or no immigration would actually impact them personally.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Next question. Okay. The next question, which will most likely be our last, given that we're committed to ending on time. Folks from KLC will be sticking around and visiting for a while, so we're happy to visit informally. But the next question, again, you're still thinking as your faction. Okay, you're still thinking as the faction that you represent. Not you personally, but that I've placed you in. What would motivate that faction to engage differently? What would motivate that faction to engage differently? Our assumption at the Kansas Leadership Center is on adaptive challenges. If we don't try something different, we'll probably keep getting the same result. Okay? So if we want a different result, we got to do something different. Doesn't have to be a huge thing different, but we're probably going to have to do something different. So the question, again, is what would motivate them to engage differently than they're currently engaging? We've got 7 or 8 minutes. Then we'll hear a few quick responses, and we'll close out the night. Thanks. Take about one more minute. All right, let's come on back. Let's come on back. Let's come on back together. So we just have a few moments left. We'd love to get one quick answer from each of these factions that we've created. And we'll start on this side this time. Somebody from the no immigration group here, no immigration exclamation mark group. What could you share? Again, we'll get all the notes, but what comes to mind? Thanks, Shannon.
Yeah, so we're thinking, I mean, we are no immigration, so we're going to have a heart change, we're going to have a mind change. So number one, we have to meet immigrants people who have immigrated here on a deep and personal level and get to know them. And we also have to understand how people who immigrate here benefit our economic system and how a merit-based economic system, immigration system, can really be such a boost to the nation's economic factor.
So the question was, what would motivate them to engage differently so if you're trying to mobilize this faction in real life now, right? I mean, what stood out to me the most, Shannon, from your comment was the idea of actually knowing people, right? I mean, it's interesting, right? So how could you intervene? You know, those at KLC, we don't have a point of view on what should happen on this issue. We do have a point of view that our toughest issues should be worked in the most productive way possible, right? And so as you think about these different factions, how could you intervene differently with them? Let's go to the next faction over. I think that's the back. Okay? All right. One comment back there real quick about, Jackson, you got one for us? About, you know, your thoughts on this question, about what would motivate them to engage differently.
Okay, so we also thought that personal stories would be very important. So I'll say my different thing, which is my idea. Sorry, group.
The power of having the mic.
Yeah, it is. So to talk, we think our faction cares a lot about the rules and what the rules are, and so perhaps we could talk about the actual facts about the rules and what it looks like when the rules are put in place, and what they actually are, as a way to think about whether any changes to the rules might be a good idea.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. How about, let's go, Sam, online, the middle faction here.
Yes.
Pointed correctly that time.
One general theme is that people would have to be affected personally by this issue in a way that they're not.
Yeah.
A friend or a family member that would motivate them into action. And along with that, one-on-one conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a theme among these, which is interesting, right? You know, actually knowing. You said stories. I heard them say relationships, so you said stories, and I think you get stories through relationships. Actually knowing more people one-on-one. How about this up-close group here? One comment here? Yasmin, you got one for us? Oh, go ahead. We got. Oh, down here. Go ahead.
And I'm not sure this relates much to this, but just one thing that I was thinking that probably we're not putting ourselves into the immigrants' shoes. And one thing that I was thinking, I didn't get to make a comment on this, is, for example, I know two ladies with huge hearts from here, and they have two exchange students, one from China and another one from another country, but similar experiences. And this young guy was living with her, and he didn't know where the dishes are, for example. No, and her perspective was, wait a minute, he's not so smart because he didn't realize the dishes are in the dishwasher. Well, this guy never grew up with a dishwasher. You know, there's no dishwashers over there. So I think what could help probably to understand the immigrants is not only to put ourselves in the shoes of who thinks on what faction we are, but also on the shoes of the immigrants, because she definitely had a personal relationship because this guy was living with her, but she didn't understand exactly where he was coming from.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. How about this last faction here? One quick comment, real quick. Go ahead.
So what our group said is to really had the same thing, get to know them on a personal level. If they don't necessarily seem to agree, but to really have sit down, educated conversation to get an understanding of the other side, and to come up with more of the shared vision.
We had no idea tonight, thank you, we had no idea tonight what we would get from these questions. I would not have predicted that we would get a common theme emerge from all these factions on this last question about relationships, which I think is intriguing and interesting. Thank you for coming tonight, and I would encourage you to keep sharing thoughts and ideas with us. Again, we're planning a series of discussions all across the state we'll use tonight to help inform that. We didn't know what to expect tonight. We expected more heat, frankly. Chris and I were just saying we think we actually have learned a lot that we need to perhaps find ways to inject more heat, you know, like let more passion speak, right? I think we were worried to get out of hand. But thank you for being a part of the first kind of conversation about Journal Talks. I want to just remind you the 2 goals from tonight. One, help you, stakeholders, inform the Journal Talks initiative. And you've done that, and you'll continue to do that, and we'll pour over the notes. And 2, we hope that you might be more inspired than you were before to host a conversation in your community. We'll help you do it. It can be small, it can be big, but we hope you'll leave a little more inspired to do that, and we'll twist your arm along the way a little bit. Thank you for being here tonight. We'll be around as long as you'd like to talk informally into the evening. Thanks, everybody.